Andrew Silsbee is the president and CEO of Kennebec Savings Bank, a long-standing community bank that supports the Central Maine region's economic and community development while providing their customers with a great banking experience. Andrew has worked up through the ranks in banking, starting as a teller in 1986 to his position now as president and CEO. He has performed nearly every job function in banking over the past 33 years, getting to know banking inside and out and making him uniquely qualified to lead the institution that's so important to his community. Andrew is motivated by his long-term vision of a vibrant, attractive, and successful capital region with opportunities for young people to put down roots and start a family. As a hands-on leader, he enjoys rolling up his sleeves and pitching in wherever he is needed, in both the bank and certainly in the community. He is involved with many of the area's nonprofit boards, such as the Chamber of Commerce, the library, and many other organizations as part of his commitment to creating a vibrant community. Welcome to the PR Maven Podcast, a podcast all about growing your network and building your brand through traditional and digital networking techniques. I'm Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven and CEO of Marshall Communications. I've been strengthening brands through PR for over 35 years, and now I'm celebrating the success of executives, influencers, business owners, and entrepreneurs from all around the world, all of whom have cultivated their brands and broadened their networks through traditional and digital networking methods. Each week, I interview one of these interesting and influential individuals and provide an opportunity for you, the PR Maven Nation, to gain insights from their strategies and stories. So stay tuned for this week's episode, and thanks for listening. So, Andrew, tell me about your career and how you got into it in the first place.
Into banking?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me on the show, Nancy. I'm very excited. It's a kind of an interesting story. I went to the University of Maine and decided that I really needed to get a job in the business field somewhere. My mother suggested potentially a bank. And so I went down to a store that was formerly in downtown Augusta that was Farrell's, which is a men's clothing store. I bought my first suit and put it on and walked down Water Street in Augusta, past the first bank, did not stop at the first bank, but stopped at the second bank. The first bank looked a little intimidating for me to go in and ask for a job, but the second bank didn't look quite so intimidating. I'm not sure why, but looking back on that today, I find that interesting. So anyway, I walked into the bank and got the job on the spot as a float teller, right on the job, right on the spot.
You hadn't made any plans in advance.
Nope,
of course, you hadn't surfed the internet because there was no internet.
Now you're dating me, but yes.
And I do remember Farrell's. I think my father used to shop for his business suits there.
Yeah, it was a great store. And it's apartments today, actually, in a wonderful restaurant on the first floor. But I really took to banking. I liked it. There was sort of innate helpfulness in my personality. I want to be helpful, and I really enjoyed the work. I, over the years, worked at a lot of different offices. I ended up at one point working that bank turned into Fleet Financial Group, and I worked for 27 different offices over an 8-year period and across Central Maine. Just how I got to know Central Maine so well. I was the guy who would go wherever they needed me. They would call me at 5 o'clock in the morning and they needed help in Boothbay Harbor. And the next day I'd get a telephone call and they needed me in Stratton or Strong, and I'd book it over there. And they were very good to me. And I got a lot of experience, met a lot of wonderful people, and some people who actually work for us at Kennebec Savings Bank today. And that was a great experience at Fleet. I went through the management trainee program with them and worked up through the branch network. And then just as fate would have it, a job opening happened at Kennebec Savings Bank, and I had just bought a house in the Augusta area a few weeks before the opportunity came up. And so I jumped on it and ended up having an interview and And then the rest is sort of history. I've had a lot of different jobs within the bank and been given a lot of great opportunities to head projects and to take the lead role of things, and really didn't know it at the time, but was being prepared for the job. I don't know that a decision was made way back when, but I look back on it today and think a lot of those things had a lot to do with where I am today. So I have the good fortune of leading an organization of 140 employees that are just phenomenal people who day in and day out get it done. Every business owner will always tell you that it's their people that make the difference. They will make your business successful. And I do believe if you take good care of employees, the smile on their face and the smile on their voice is genuine, and the rest works itself out.
Well, I'm sure that you loved meeting the people, as you said, and the people loved meeting you too, because I know from working with you that you have a detailed mind.
I do.
So I'm sure when you meet someone or have met someone throughout your career who has a problem, you can dissect that problem and solve that problem.
It's really what bankers do. So what's interesting, and I've talked about this a lot over the years, in the banking world, you don't get to develop your own widget. Everybody sells the same products and services. And it's because we're a regulated industry, the regulators only allow this, spectrum of product set. And if you develop something new and the regulators allow you to be able to do that, to sell that, every other bank can sell the same thing. So the only thing we're really competing on these days is service. And so it all comes down to making sure that you're hiring people who innately want to help the people, are kind. There's a core personality that's a kindness. And we're very fortunate at Kennebec Savings Bank to have a whole host of folks that fit that profile. I was speaking recently, and I told the crowd, think of the person, think of yourself as grabbing an orange in the produce section, and 10 other oranges fall down onto the floor, and they roll all over the place. And then the other customer who's near you in the produce section stops their cart and helps you pick up those oranges and put them all back because you're embarrassed, right, that this happened. That's the person we want to hire. It's a kindness to them.
So as part of your job interview process, do you take somebody to the produce section?
No, I'm hanging out in the produce section.
Like, oh yeah, you must want a job with Kennebec Savings.
We'll teach you banking.
Yeah, right.
That's secondary. We'll teach the banking piece. But you do want a kindness, and I think that's the important component in customer service. Right.
Well, I think you're selling your products and services, but you're also selling hope. It's a little bit like skincare products that are like.
Okay, I haven't heard that analogy before, but I'll take it.
I think you're selling hope for the future, that your money will be safe and it will grow over time, and that you're going to have a secure retirement and be able to pass money on to the next generation.
Well, the value add is that we have expertise. So what I talk a lot about is we're trying to help people get from point A to point B. Point A to point B might be a home to a retirement home. It might be apartment to your first home. It might be helping you settle your mother's estate. It might be setting up a trust for a special needs child that you have. There's, think of point A to point B not as a physical location necessarily change, but a change in your life. And we deal with this stuff every day. So unfortunately, there's a lot of divorces that happen in the world, and every person who's going through a divorce feels like they're alone. We deal with divorces day in and day out at the bank, and because they have to refinance, and there's lots of activity that happens around that. And we are very accustomed in the sensitivity that we have around the parties not necessarily getting along and trying to weave our way through. And we provide an enormous amount of value add to help people get through that process. And that it's not all about just managing money. It's about helping people because we have the expertise that we've done this before lots of times. And here's what we typically see how this happens.
Well, full disclosure, I am a customer of Kennebec Savings Bank, so I personally have experienced this service, and I can definitely vouch for the fact that the people are very compassionate and empathetic, and And as you said, detail oriented.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to hear that. That's great.
Yeah.
Appreciate the feedback.
So do you have a how-to tip to share with PR Maven Nation for maintaining a customer service culture in a digital world?
Wow, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I would have to say, well, first and foremost, take care of your people. So customer service at its basic core is hiring the right people that have that innate personality that wants to help. That's the important component. I think that goes without being said, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Right.
The next component really on the digital side of things would be make sure that you're an early adopter. So stay relevant is really what I preach, is to make sure that you're on the cutting edge. So be an early adopter. So I'm the geek that stays up in line, gets up early in the morning to be able to buy the next Apple product. I'm the person that stands in line overnight to buy the next product.
And I know you pay with your Apple Watch,
I
too.
pay with my Apple Watch at the supermarket.
Yeah.
And I really do gravitate. I like the change that technology brings. And so I always tell people, be an early adopter. And I think that's really an important component. Adapt to technology is another component of staying relevant, to understand that technology is constantly changing, and really accept that technology is here to stay and it's not going to go anywhere. So it's those kind of three components that lead up to staying relevant. So be an early adopter, adapt to technology, and accept that technology is here to stay.
Yeah, good. And I think that, you and I share that we did not grow up with this technology, but that we both have enjoyed it and embraced it. And, we talked a little bit about the Rocket Book that you and your team introduced me to.
Yeah, and for the listeners out there, the Rocket Book is a booklet that you can purchase. I don't know, it's $29 or $30.
A notebook. Yeah.
And you can write notes in it, and you take a picture with your phone, and it converts the text in. It converts your handwriting into text, and it categorizes it because there's a barcode at the bottom.
To save it to Dropbox or
do whatever you want with it, and then you just take a cloth and wipe clean your notes and start over, and it's pretty cool. So I'm not a prolific note taker. I'm usually better at just listening to people than taking notes. So I don't have a Rocket Book, but I should get a commission for selling a lot more of them.
Yeah, because I'm the type of person that I have to write things down to remember them. It helps me engage. And in school, I always wrote down just about every word that the teacher said, because that's how I retain information.
So for me, what I always found is I get behind in taking the notes, and then I'm not listening to the next sentence or whatever the teacher's saying. So it doesn't work for me.
Right.
So I'm really better off to just focus on the teacher and listen and retain the information. So
yeah. Well, it takes all kinds.
It does.
So Kennebec Savings is celebrating its 150th year anniversary, which is really amazing that the institution has been around for that long. How does an institution stay relevant for 150 years and stay in business? And what's the secret sauce?
Well, that is a great question. I am deeply honored to be at the helm of this institution as it reaches its 150th birthday anniversary. I'm not sure what you call that, but Joshua Chamberlain, the Civil War hero, came back to Maine and was the governor of the state of Maine. And as a mutual bank, we were created by an act of the Maine legislature, and Joshua Chamberlain signed our charter into existence.
And you have his portrait in your office.
We do have his portrait. Angus King had some prints made of a wonderful portrait that was done of Joshua Chamberlain, and when he became governor, he had 100 of these prints made, and we grabbed one and had it framed, and it hangs in my office, actually, and it is a constant reminder of leadership and of the bank's heritage and history. We opened in 1870 with 3 deposit accounts. One was for $300, which was a lot of money back then. One was for $10, and one was for $100. We didn't have any loans that first day. There were just 3 depository accounts. And over time, things changed. Mutual banks were created for the common person to save money and buy a home. Prior to that mutual bank movement, People really didn't need mortgages. They bartered. I have corn, you have wood. We'll switch. And people built homes on their own or with the neighbors. There were barn raisings. You didn't really need a mortgage loan. And when you get to about the middle 1800s, mortgage lending started to pick up steam, and the founding fathers in those days, right or wrong, really decided that we needed a different kind of financial institution for the common person to save money and buy a home. And so that's the heritage. We are still the largest mortgage underwriter provider in our catchment area, over 33% market share. And we have never lost that customer service and that mortgage lending. And a lot of banks have tried a lot of different things. And our CFO at the bank says we need to stick to our knitting. And there's a lot of truth to that. So I think the secret sauce is providing great customer service, that added value that we talked about earlier. But then it's a niche business. You have to find your niche in this world. There's always somebody who wants to sell another product or another service to your customers. So you need to be good at what you're doing and try not to be something you're not. And I think that's the important component. And we've lasted 150 years. It's just an incredible run. And my hope is that we can make sure this institution is in the best possible condition to turn it over to the next generation so it can go another 150 years. And that's what we hope for.
Right. Well, of course, I have to give a shout out to Bill Hill.
Yeah.
Because Bill Hill actually handled the mortgage that I applied for not too long ago. And you, as a bank, and he, as an individual, have a lightning fast process. And I think actually having a process is important in any business. Just like in my business, we have the Marshall Plan process. And so you've done this mortgage application process over and over and over, and you have a really amazing process. And it's kind of surprise and delight for customers, I think, because they're nervous about making such a huge transaction, and you surprise and delight them by doing it so competently and so quickly.
Well, thank you for that. Changing homes is a stressful process.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how many Friday afternoons we will have U-Haul trucks sitting in our parking lot. I come in from my lunch hour and I see these U-Haul trucks. And I sit and pause sometimes and think everyone's life possessions are sitting in that U-Haul truck. They're stressed. They're stuffing stuff in boxes. They've got the last minute boxes that are taking the last items and everything they have, because they have to sell their home in the morning and then they have to buy the new home in the afternoon. And it's stressful. So what we try to do is really, truly take the stress out of that process. And what you're talking about, Bill's been with us for 27 years at the bank. He actually came to the bank a year before I did. And he opened our Winthrop office for us and was just an unbelievable success out there. And so when we decided to go to Freeport and open up a new office, we leaned over to Bill and said, would you be willing to take this on for us? And he, pushed his hand up just as high as he could and said, I'll take it. So he jumped in, and we opened it first as a loan production office, so it just did lending, and we've just recently opened it as a full service branch. And Travis Rowell is a young man who is managing that office, but Bill I like to say, Bill's been the tip of the spear for us in the Freeport community, and that community has just been so open-armed and welcoming to us. In just 2 years, we've originated over $100 million worth of loans. I know that's a big number for me.
Gives me the chills.
to your listeners how much that is a vote of confidence, and it was loud and clear message that this community wanted us to be there, and so it's been a huge success. So I appreciate the shout out to Bill. He's done a great job for us, and we love having him on staff.
Well, I believe that the mortgage division of Kennebec Savings is an important aspect of your business, but actually the involvement with the community is critical too. So as a community bank, you're involved with a lot of different institutions and organizations, and that leads to my next question, which is about building your network and your personal brand. So you've been involved with a lot of organizations, both locally and nationally, which has helped build the Andrew Silsbee network. Can you talk more about that?
The raging fans?
Yeah, raving fans.
Sorry. This is a tough one for me, Nancy. This is an easier question for you, the branding person. I do think giving back to the community is really important, and the community being in quotations, because the community could be my own, where I live, my own community, residential community. It's the bank's catchment area community. It's the industry. So I try to get involved in making change at a national level for our industry. And I firmly believe that if you're in an industry, you have to be an advocate for your industry, because trust me, no one else will be advocating for your industry. It's really up to us. And I have found that you can move Congress and the state legislature on issues.
You go there, right?
I do. I do testify both at the state level and go to Washington on a pretty regular basis, usually every 6 months, to meet with our congressional leadership and to try to talk about issues that are really important to the banking industry. I'm not alone. It's a revolving door down to Washington, D.C. If your listeners have never been through that experience, our delegation are very accessible in Maine. If you're in California, it might be a little bit different. But here in Maine, our 4 delegates, they open their doors, they make appointments, they spend time with you, and they listen. And we have had success in moving decision-making in particular banking issues. And we won't get into all those details today. But I think understanding that you can make change happen. So, personal branding is a funny question for me. I do my job, and I have met a lot of people. The banking world is kind of interesting. We have 50,000 accounts at the bank. That's a lot. If you break it down, it's like 40,000 individual tax ID numbers. So think of that. Each tax ID number is an individual or a business. And so we have 40,000 people who are depending on us day in and day out to maintain their money, take care of their transactions, and to provide them advice and counsel. So you get the opportunity to meet a lot of people. So I do have a large network, but there are people who have a lot more Twitter fans and LinkedIn fans, and I'm not necessarily a fan of Facebook. I do believe that Facebook survives because extroverts want to share information and the introverts of the world want to creep on the extroverts. That's why I think Facebook is so popular.
So guess which one of us is sharing?
Guess which one's which? Okay.
Is sharing. I don't know if you creep, but I know I share.
But I do like LinkedIn. It's a little more business component, so it's less about your personal life and more about your professional life. And I think LinkedIn is really picking up steam of late. I know Facebook has had a little bit of challenges on the privacy side of things, and I think LinkedIn, I haven't looked up any statistics necessarily, but I think LinkedIn is really picking up steam of late. And I learn a lot. I get to read other people's articles that are out there. I've written a few articles myself, and I was selected to be on the Forbes Finance Council, which is an invitation only kind of approach where you get to provide content. I think Forbes does this because they want ideas. Everything is about content today, so they're getting me to write content for them. It's a win for them, and it's been really fun to me. The topics that I've been trying to concentrate on is really the community bank space. I'm a huge advocate for community banking. We are the economic engine in so many towns across Maine, and we provide much needed capital. We take your deposits, and then we lend those deposits back out to the community. And it's a great place. So we fulfill people's dreams. I know that sounds really corny, but people come into the bank and they have an idea, they have a concept, they want to do something. We sit down with them, we work through the process and try to be able to help them get where they want to go. And so I know, again, it's sort of corny, but we are every day fulfilling people's dreams. I talk with the lenders a lot about garages. So we live here in Maine, and we had a snowstorm just a couple of days ago, and it's not a lot of fun to brush off your car and get the snow off the car. And you cannot believe how excited customers are. So they bought their house. It didn't have a garage, and they're saving money, and they want a garage. And you cannot believe how excited people get at the closing of a loan to be able to build their garage. And I know it sounds kind of funny, but people really get excited. And to the lending staff at the bank, we do hundreds of these a year, these garage loans, because people in Maine want a garage. And
they want to put all their toys in there too.
They do
their
probably want to put their toys in, but
motorcycles.
a lot of it has to do with shoveling it off because they're tired of shoveling their car off. And so it's really gratifying. There's a satisfaction to the lending process where it's a beginning and you're able to help somebody get where they want to go. And so from a value of your employment standpoint, you get this satisfaction that you really help somebody. And, it's constant all the time at the bank. But people, I think, banking has taken a hit in its reputation since 2008, the industry as a whole. But community banking is alive and well and really was never injured during that financial crisis. And we do a lot of good work. And I'm not sure that is told out in the marketplace enough.
Well, and of course, I feel like in the communities where Kennebec Savings Bank has buildings, Augusta and Waterville certainly, your buildings are magnificent and the grounds are beautiful, and you put a high value on the landscaping, for example. So I feel like as an institution, you bring beauty to the communities.
It's a way of giving back.
Right.
It's very intentional. I have always threatened the marketing department that I'm going to take the landscaping budget out of the marketing budget because it is a form of marketing. And I do believe that taking care of your property is infectious. It can go both ways. We all know that a house that becomes dilapidated in your neighborhood will pull down the values. We also know that it's somebody who's building a nice house will bring up the values. And if you put that at its elementary level at the landscaping, you can impact the value. Not necessarily monetary value, but sort of intrinsic value. People tell us all the time that we brighten their day when they go by and see the beautiful grounds. And people tell me, I always knew if you took that good of care of your properties and your grounds, that you would take that good of care of my money. And that is the hope at the end of the day, that people understand we care about this stuff. We are also employing a lot of people in the community. I mean, we don't have a gardener on staff, but we hire people who are tremendous gardeners. And so it is a form of marketing. It's very, very intentional. We're also a little bit different in the financial world. A lot of banks have a lot of branches. And we have invested in technology in a very careful and strategic way. So we don't have as many branches. Our network is smaller from the branch standpoint. The bank has grown 20% in its number of customers over the last 5 years, and we have 20% less people coming into lobbies. So people go to banks less and less. So investing in new branches doesn't necessarily, it's kind of fighting the trend a little bit. So being mindful of that. The reason I mention that, Nancy, is we can afford to spend a little more money on each of the branches because we have so many fewer branches than some of our peers necessarily. Right.
And those tulips, the tulips in the springtime are just so beautiful.
Well, thank you. That's a good one. That sometimes comes up. We actually make a donation to the Parkinson's Society, and this is the Garden of Hope. And you plant tulips and put the sign up for the Parkinson's Society. So we're really just making a donation to the Parkinson's Society, and they give us a lot of tulip bulbs. So yes, we have to plant those. I'm not out there personally planting tulip bulbs, but we do have a lot of folks taking care of that, and it's a pretty big number, but it does brighten people's day. In Maine, it's a long winter. And when spring comes around and the crocuses are up and then the tulips are up, it's a sign of hope. And
my own father had Parkinson's, so I appreciate that. I appreciate raising the awareness and fundraising for Parkinson's. So thank you.
We do give back to the community in both dollars and volunteer hours. So we dedicate 10% of our income to go back to the communities we serve, and my expectation is that 2019 will be just about $1 million back to the community. And all banks in the state of Maine, we have 31 banks in the state, and all banks in the state of Maine give back to the communities at $12 million in community giving.
That's amazing.
It's a big number. I'm very proud of the fact that we are one of the 12. When there's 31 banks. So we have strived really hard to make sure that we're giving back of our dollars. But then what I'm most proud about is our employees that give back of their time. So we have 135 employees. It ebbs and flows, but about 135 employees, and give back over 9,000 hours of community volunteer time. If you do the math, that works out to about 8.5 business days per employee. And so we encourage people to get involved, to be the T-ball coach, to be the treasurer of the library, to get out and be involved and make a difference. I was
greeted at the Trek Across Maine in Augusta at the Waterfront Park by a team of Kennebec Savings Bank employees when I was riding.
Yes, we had a whole team
miles.
Over there.
It was so awesome to see my friends from Kennebec Savings when I was on that last day trying to complete 180 miles on my bike over Father's Day weekend.
Maine General does Walk for Hope, is their big fundraiser to raise cancer awareness, and it's for all different types of cancer. It started out as breast cancer and has moved in, and that's a really big cause for us. We had a team that was 90 people that walked in the Walk for Hope to raise money so we were their largest fundraiser team for Maine General. They do just a phenomenal job. And so that's just another example of our employees that, it's our dollars, it's their time, and then they're raising money too. So, that wasn't the bank dollars. Those were employees raising money out for Maine General. And it's just been it's a great experience. And to see, 1,000, 1,200 people all walking to cure cancer, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's remarkable. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about banking as a whole now. I'm actually a little out of order here.
No worries.
Sorry. So banking is competitive, and not only are there community banks, but companies like Amazon and Facebook are getting into the game with their own credit and debit cards and even their own currency. How do you compete? And I know that one of the ways is those incredible employees out in the community, obviously.
Yeah, that is the most important component, is that service component. As I mentioned, I think earlier in one of the earlier questions about we're all competing on service. And, the biggest challenge is non-banks. I mean, it's very competitive on Main Street for banks to try to get customers to pay attention to their institution, to use their institution, because there's 31 banks in the state of Maine. But the competition is really coming from non-banks. Places, as a great example, Venmo. My kids move money constantly through Venmo. Well, that's not in the banking system. It's not FDIC insured. And, when you only have $2 or $3, you're not all that concerned about FDIC insurance. But as you move on in life and there's you have more responsibility, children come on the scene, you can't fail. And there's a little more pressure to make sure that you're being careful of your dollars. And so I'm not sure what will happen with the Venmos of the world. Apple Cash is another example. That money is not sitting in the banking business. And so, but Venmo is more of a social transfer of money. My kids shame the other kids for not paying their 1/4 of the bill at the restaurant, and you can see all the things that they pay for. And
beer,
yes.
I know with my kids it's usually beer.
So it is a different experience, and hats off to the organization for tapping into people wanting to mix this sort of social component of social media in with the transfer of money. But it's outside of the banking business.
That's interesting. I did not know that.
I do think we're going to, the banking industry, along with the Federal Reserve doesn't generally move very fast. And so the banking industry has to sort of wait in many respects for the Federal Reserve. So we're a little slow on the game here. People don't really care about all of the different ways that you can move money. They just want to be able to move money from me to you, or you to me. I would be better, you to me. They don't really care. And I really think what's going to happen, Nancy, is this is going to be like shipping. This is my best analogy. It's just going to be like shipping. When you order something online, you have choices. And you know that next day is going to be really expensive. But you don't really need this item for a couple of days. You're going to travel and you'll be back next Friday. So I'll take ground shipping, and it's either free or it's not a lot of money. You're choosing the method at the speed at which you want that item to be delivered to you. I believe that payments are going to be the same way, that you're going to choose how fast do you want that payment. So a birthday present for your brother on your brother's birthday is probably a little more challenging. You need to deliver that ASAP right now. That is complicated in the banking with the current Federal Reserve and the current, we call them rails in the banking business. They're pathways of how payments get from point A to point B. And there are lots of different pathways. And we're trying to figure out in the entire industry is what is the biggest pathway. So I think in the end, there'll be a menu of choices on how quickly you want to be able to get that payment. I mean, back in the day, Nancy, we wrote a lot of checks. We're not writing as many checks. Check printers, the people who print checks actually physically, it's a dying business. It's a funky business model. There still will be checks in the world, but we're moving more and more to electronic payments.
Absolutely. I've noticed it myself, that's for sure.
So anyway, I'm not sure if I answered your competition question, but competition is everywhere, and it's about the value add. It's trying to take the knowledge that we have and pass it on to the customer, and that's really what we get paid for. And it isn't really all that different than an attorney or an accountant. You go in for professional advice from those folks, and you pay typically by the hour. The banking industry doesn't do that. They sort of do it for free and hope that you use their services. So it's a funny model. I don't think it's ever going to get to the day where you're paying by the hour for that advice in a bank. But you never know.
Well, yeah, that will be interesting. Well, we're going to continue this wonderful conversation with Andrew shortly, but first I want to share exciting news with PR Maven Nation about how you can connect with me on the podcast. We've created the PR Maven Podcast listener line, so you can now call 207-620-9075 and ask me questions or share feedback or ideas for the podcast. And we'll actually play your recording right on the podcast. And if it's a question, I will answer it on the podcast. So right now we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more of Andrew Silsbee in a moment. This podcast is all about growing your network in order to strengthen your brand. In my 30-plus year marketing and PR career, I have seen many organizations waste their precious time and money on marketing because they're trying to obtain success without any strategy to achieve their goals. So many organizations and companies suffer from what I call the shiny object syndrome, trying every new fad that comes down the pike. That's why I created the Marshall Plan 15 years ago. We have done over 100 of these plans for clients, helping them to get out of their day-to-day routine to identify their goals, solidify their brand story, focus in on their ideal customer avatar, analyze their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and create a realistic budget and measurement dashboard. We create the Marshall Plan collaboratively with our clients over the course of 3 months. We have a 65-step process to create a highly customized, actionable plan. And it's not like we come in and say, we are the consultants from away and we know everything. Instead, we come in and say, let's sit down at the table with your leadership team and we'll bring our expertise in what's working in PR and marketing. And our client team brings their knowledge of what's working in their organization. And together we come up with a really amazing plan. For many, it's been a transformative process. I have watched how teams have come together and their faces light up because they have such a sense of accomplishment and they're so excited about the future of their organization. We help our client figure out the best way to implement the plan, sometimes using people within their organization and sometimes with our help. We would love to chat with you about how you can expand your network and achieve your marketing goals with a Marshall Plan. Go to marshallpr.com/MarshallPlan to learn more about the process, or better yet, send me an email at nancy@prmaven.com and we'll set up a time to talk and get started. And now back to our conversation. So welcome back, and today we're talking with Andrew Silsbee of Kennebec Savings Bank, and I want to dive right back in with some more questions. So Andrew, let's talk more about my favorite topic, branding. What has Kennebec Savings done to build its phenomenal brand?
Well, a lot of years of giving great customer service to people. I think that's an important component of that. We talked a little bit about giving back to the community. I think the younger generations put a higher value on doing business with organizations that give back. There's I think particularly the millennial group, and they don't like to be called millennial group, but the millennial group in particular really wants to feel like they're doing business with somebody who is a good corporate citizen and is giving back. And I think that's a really important component to that. So as we mentioned before, we dedicate 10% of our income to go back, and our employees volunteer over 9,000 hours. That all matters in terms of the brand. People tell me all the time, you guys are involved in everything that's good, and your people and your sponsorships are involved in everything. So we spread a wide net as opposed to a very narrow focused net. Some organizations move in and decide that they're going to make a difference in this cause, and they work really hard at that, and that's wonderful. We tend to try to be a broader net in terms of that. So I'm a firm believer, Nancy, using a tennis analogy of you just have to consistently hit the ball over the net and the other guy will make the mistake. So we just making sure that we hire the right people and that they're giving good customer service and we consistently hit that ball over the net. And I know it sounds a little dorky, but it works over time. And we do have a long brand, 150 years. We're just shy of that as we sit here today, but 150 years. I mean, I cannot believe the Founding Fathers are probably looking back and very proud from the sky looking down on where Kennebec Savings Bank. Who would have thought that we would have be where we are today as the 10th largest Maine-based bank? And they started it with $410 that first day.
Well, I believe that a brand is really how you make your targeted audience feel, because I think a brand resides in the heart and mind of your targeted audience. So I believe that people throughout the Kennebec Valley region and now beyond into southern Maine, they have a really good feeling, and that's what you're talking about. When they think about the bank, they not only think about the safety of their money and their hope for the future, but they do think about all of those volunteers in the community and all those donations that you make to nonprofits. So.
My business is contributing to doing well in the community, and I think it matters to people. And some people don't. They're more either rate conscious or whatever, and I totally understand that. But I think the lion's share of people, that's the important piece. It is a feeling. You're absolutely right, Nancy. It's they want to feel that they're doing good with their dollars.
Right. And now Central Maine, you also have done a lot for the Central Maine region, and you are bullish on Central Maine, Andrew. So what is it about Central Maine that you're so enthusiastic about?
The list is so long, Nancy. I absolutely love Central Maine. I just think it is a hidden treasure. And I know that Southern Maine, in many respects, gets a lot of the press and the publicity. But the people of Central Maine are absolutely phenomenally nice. People say that all the time. I think the environment component of Central Maine is fabulous, from the coast to the mountains. And where I live is in the Lakes region. So you've got the Belgrade Lakes, and then you've got Monmouth and Winthrop and all of the wonderful lakes. I happen to have a small summer place on Cobussy, and the lake community is alive and well, and it is a community in and of itself, is this sort of lake community. So and then economically, many times we've had economic cycles, and I think of it as a tide. So the water comes up, and then it gets to about Richmond town line, and historically it's then pulled back, and we never got that economic development that everybody else got. But in this particular economic cycle, Central Maine has benefited greatly. So the water has reached us in this particular economic cycle.
And all ships will rise with the tide.
You got it. And so from that standpoint, I also think Central Maine is a good value. So house prices are very different. I'll give you a quick example. So in Waterville and in Augusta, our average mortgage loan size is $135,000. In Freeport, that average size is $255,000. So there's a fair amount of difference in pricing, and what's going on is folks are moving farther north for affordability purposes. And I know Portland's working hard on affordable housing, and that's a big challenge, and the new mayor has talked about the challenges with that. And I'm standing on a soapbox saying, look at Central Maine, because there's such value to be able to buy a home and really have a great life. So you add that, and then you've got this whole really nice and cultural component. Central Maine is really doing a really good job with the arts community. So we've been really bullish at Kennebec Savings Bank on both the development of Johnson Hall and Gardner, and also of Colonial Theater in Augusta. We support all the arts from Monmouth, the theater at Monmouth, at Cumston Hall, and the Opera House up in Waterville, and Waterville Creates. All of those organizations are doing a phenomenal job in terms of the arts to really round out the experience in Central Maine. So great people, great environment, lots of great economic activity, a good value, nice people. What more is there to talk about?
I agree, absolutely, and safe. It's a safe environment to raise a family.
I think that's an important component.
Exactly.
I honestly, Nancy, it's not at the top of my list because I never think about it. I guess guilty.
You're right,
and you're absolutely right.
So you've also been a champion for the region on Erin O'Valley's show, Maine Life, and what has been the bank's relationship with the show, and when and how can people watch it?
Oh, that's a great question. Talking about pushing people outside their comfort zone, sticking me in front of a camera is personally been a bit of a challenge because there's a permanency to recording that's always a challenge for me.
Video recording.
Video recording in particular. But anyway, Aaron has been most kind in helping me work through that process. We started out a couple of years ago just as a regular sponsor, and then last year ended up changing to be the presenting sponsor, and we have just signed up to be the presenting sponsor again next year. I think Aaron in particular has just an amazing talent for getting people to tell their stories. And so we have certainly had people in the state of Maine that are great storytellers out on the television. But what Aaron really does that I think is quite unique about her particular show is she gets the people to tell their story. And that's what's the draw and why viewership has gone up quite dramatically. Channel 6 has just signed her on for the 7 o'clock time show on Saturday night. That is the coveted spot in Maine. And hats off to her for producing a really good show that people like. And we are so proud to be part of it. And Aaron's, my job is to try to help get Aaron to Central Maine because I think oftentimes there's a draw to things that are going on in other parts of the state. And again, I'm standing on the soapbox, waving my arms like I'm on a runway, directing a plane, trying to get people to relook at Central Maine. And so I'm a huge advocate of that. And Aaron has been very complimentary of all the people. Everywhere we've gone in Central Maine, they've just rolled out the red carpet for her. And she's told me, I assume not in confidence since we're being recorded, but she's been nudging her husband we should think about moving to Central Maine. So if I can get that to happen, it's a huge win.
That'd be amazing. Well, I've watched your relationship, the bank's relationship, and your relationship with the show and with Aaron flourish. And I just think it's so great. I enjoy the show so much, and it always makes me smile when I see you on the show, of course, because I introduced you to Aaron.
That's right. You did. Part of your network. It was great. It's been great. She's so talented. I really, honestly, and I've told her this before, but I don't think people on the outside really understand how much work it is to be on television and how hard she works to make sure that she's promoting whatever she's interviewing and to draw people out. And I watch her do it, and a lot of it's recorded, but some of it ends up on the editing floor because they're looking for a segment that's this many minutes long. But I'm in awe of her talents. It's really an impressive skill. Yes,
well, she is. Again, she's an extremely compassionate and empathetic person. And so, I admire her very much as well. And she has a combination of the journalism background as well as just being a good friend to people. So I admire her for that.
Yeah, she's built a lot of network in being here in Maine. She's built a pretty extensive network. It's great.
She has. So another thing you've been doing is writing columns, as you mentioned, for Forbes.com. And what have you written about for Forbes.com?
Well, I've tried to concentrate. We mentioned this a little bit earlier. I tried to concentrate some of that. It's really being more of a thought leader. In trying to, it's a little hard to put your ideas out there, to step outside your comfort zone. But I'm such a passionate person about community banking. That's really where my professional experience is. I've been in banking, as you mentioned earlier, for 33 years, and I've seen a lot of different ways to do banking and to not do banking. So I'm an advocate of the community bank space. I do think that banking took a rough hit in the financial crisis as a general industry, and that somehow we caused this financial meltdown, and there are probably a lot of fingers that can get pointed. And I don't think the banking industry deserved as much as the political hit, reputation, brand hit that it took. So I do try to advocate for the industry, and a lot of what I've written about is how community banks sort of differ and how different we are in the marketplace, and that we're an economic driver. I wrote a whole article on mentorships, and we try really hard to grow people from within our organization. We hire a lot of college students. We dedicate 10% of our workforce in college students to come in and help out in the summer. My usual stick on this, comments on this subject are, it's really interesting. Maine is such a beautiful state, particularly in June, July, and August. And our staff want to be able to take vacation. And lo and behold, college students are home in June, July, and August, and they want to make money. And so what we try to do is mirror those up and put together a program of internships so that they can fill in for our staff. It's generally about $4,000 per intern. And so if we put 10 interns on, it's $40,000. If we put 12, it's it's a little bit more than that. But so every summer, it's a little bit different. But then our staff get to be able to take vacation when they want to take vacation. So that makes them more loyal to the bank, more appreciative of giving their time and energy to our organization. It's a quality of life thing. And so it's a win all the way around. And so many of those individuals have moved and ended up staying at the organization over time and have moved into roles. We've been doing this since 1996. And I know everybody kind of hires some college student for this, that, or the other thing, but it has been a very intentional project for us since the mid-'90s. And many of our top executives today started in the project. Craig Garofalo works for us, and he's our executive vice president and chief operating officer. And Craig started as a summer teller. In season 2, when he came back, we actually put him in the mailroom. So Craig literally has worked from the mailroom to more or less second in command at the organization. And it's you get to identify these people. Everybody interviews. Generally, everybody interviews pretty well. But what's nice about this is it's really an extended interview. So we get, typically, if we hire a freshman and they come into the organization and they'll work 4 summers for us, you see them develop and grow. And we have plans this year to put more emphasis on touching bases with them during the year, during the summer, and giving them some access to some of the senior leadership so that they get a little more sense. I'm trying to make sure that they understand that Maine has an incredible opportunity, that banking in particular has all these different sub-industries within it. People don't think about that. They think, I'm not good with money. Well, listen, in the banking world, we have salespeople, right? We have IT people. We have cybersecurity experts, right? We have facilities people. We have people who are financial analysts who analyze. We have fraud analysts who are
marketing people.
We have marketing people.
And
Thank
community
you, Nancy.
relations.
And we have community relations. Somebody's got to help us give away the dollars that we dedicate back to the community. There's so many, I kind of call it sub-industries that sit in the banking. And, it's generally a really good work environment. And so I want young people to understand, to stop and think, before they want to move out. Because I know in Maine, we have a reputation of our young people moving away, and we're getting to be older and older in Maine. And I think we're now the oldest state in the nation. So we're just trying to do our part to make sure that young people see this as an opportunity. We had a woman who was going to go to New York City, and she worked for us for a summer and said, "I won't be back. I'm gonna work in New York City," and then came back and she ended up working for us, and then she ended up working for us, and she kept saying that she was going to go, and she ended up buying a house, and she's doing a phenomenal job for us at the bank. But over time, she got used to thinking that, the grass isn't necessarily greener somewhere else, and there's a great opportunity here. And so she's still with us today. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think as a result, you have a relatively young staff for a bank, don't you?
I don't know that statistically. That's my sense of that. People are a little bit astonished that we have so many young people in leadership levels of the organization. I do think, for me personally, they give me a lot of energy. I get energy from them. They look at things differently. We formed a millennial committee in our bank, and this is 9 people that are all of millennial age, and we change the group each year. And then the leadership team of the bank sends questions down to this group. They meet by themselves. They have minutes, but some of us we're not in the room, and they kick it around. And we glean a lot from what these folks are, how they bank and what they're doing. And their feedback is really important because, millennials are gaining ground at being in leadership positions. I do believe you can lead from any level of the organization. You can be a leader. But millennials, just by time, have not necessarily reached that executive level. So it's important to be able to have. They will be the leaders fairly soon in organizations because the non-millennials will be gone. So getting their perspective, I highly recommend forming a millennial committee for any organization with any size and get their perspective. Dedicate, have them take minutes. We actually divided this up, and each of the millennial members lead one of the meetings, and there's a subject matter for that particular meeting, and they have to lead their fellow folks around the table, so it's a good learning experience for them. And so, anyway, I've written about a lot of this stuff, and Forbes has been. I'm very honored to be part of, to be asked, and to be part of that finance council, and just try to bring the community bank perspective to the table.
Well, I think you've done a great job, and I think that advice to form a millennial committee is really useful, regardless of industry. So, thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So how can members of PR Maven Nation get in touch with you if they want to follow up with you directly? Oh,
great. Happy to chat with anybody. We obviously the bank's webpage is kennebecsavings.bank, and you can reach out to me through that. You can reach out to any of us at the bank through there. I'm also on LinkedIn. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a big fan of LinkedIn, so folks can certainly do that, and happy to chat with anybody.
Well, Andrew, this has been a lot of fun, and there's so much to talk about. I think we'll have to have you back for a second episode, maybe during your 150th anniversary. That'd be great. Yeah,
that would be fun. We'll have cake.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and thanks to everyone from PR Maven Nation for joining us today. And I hope you have a great day, PR Maven Nation. That's it for this week's episode. I'd like to thank you for listening, and if you feel that you've gotten value out of today's conversation, consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes or whatever app you're using to tune in. If you haven't subscribed yet, you should do so. I release a new episode each week, and subscribing will make sure you get an alert when there's a new episode. You can also join the PR Maven Nation by going to prmaven.com/nation and clicking join. It's free, and it's a great community of like-minded individuals who are all looking to learn and grow from one another. If you have an Alexa-enabled device, be sure to add the PR Maven Marketing Minute to your daily flash briefing menu. Thanks again for listening, and have a great rest of your week, PR Maven Nation.